When I heard Mojang, likely after getting the say-so from Microsoft I imagine, would be taking the Minecraft license and cranking out a new online co-op action RPG game, which would tell this amazing story while also allowing us to explore the vast and indefinite world of Minecraft from an entirely new perspective, I'll be honest, I burst out laughing. I remember I was in a call with some friends of mine when we were watching the gameplay trailer, and for the life of me, I could not take this game seriously. I honestly thought, before reading otherwise, that this was Mojang's response to Diablo Immortal. Take a relatively well-loved and critically acclaimed series, hire a small team of developers, and then out of nowhere announce this mobile spin-off to keep your hardcore fans entertained, while the rest of your developers continue working on ensuring the longer-term success of the franchise. But I was wrong. This is not a mobile game, although perhaps it would have been better for everyone involved if it was. It's not like they could come out with a worse reveal than Blizzard did with Diablo Immortal. God, that one's a classic. Minecraft Dungeons was originally touted as the next big thing for Minecraft, with the game abandoning its iconic LEGO-like focus on creative building and instead leaning more towards the game's more hardcore RPG elements. Except the irony being that Minecraft Dungeons ended up being less of a hardcore RPG than Minecraft itself is. In Minecraft, you have a ton of RPG features like weapon and armor crafting, creating health potions, which in Minecraft's case was allowing the player to cook a variety of foods, which would endow the player with healing and other positive properties. You could acquire spellbooks and craft enchantments, assuming the player had the knowledge and skill to take advantage of them. Plus, you had a lot of resources like redstone, which could be used to power a lot of useful utility items. Inventory management was a thing, and with not only player inventory, but also allowing the player to store items in a chest for future use. I could dedicate an entire 20-minute long video to describing how in many ways Minecraft is probably one of the most iconic RPG games of all time. Yet in Minecraft Dungeons, here's a full list of quote-unquote RPG game mechanics incorporated into the game. Weapon leveling, character leveling, loot grinding, enemies having visible health bars, end-of-level bosses, dungeon exploration, optional arenas that reward the player with loot for eliminating groups of enemies, in-game merchants that the player can go to acquire items from, and a linear level-based gameplay structure. Yeah, that's about it. Basically, the core elements required from any RPG game, and nothing more. But to add insult to injury, Mojang couldn't even bring itself to execute those simple gameplay elements correctly. Let's talk about the main campaign, the main hook, the only actual mode in the game at the moment. That's right, there's no PvP content or alternative PvP mode. The campaign itself is your one and only source of gameplay right now. So naturally, you would make the logical step and assume that with the vast amount of time, money, and resources Mojang has at their disposal, this would be one amazingly intricate and fully fleshed out campaign. How many levels might you be able to expect? 9. That's right, the entire game consists of 9 levels. You can play through the whole game in linear order in less than 4 hours. Try to let that sink in for a moment. Mojang's, and by extension Microsoft's, newest Minecraft game, a game inspired both by Diablo and by Minecraft itself, is 4 hours long. Comparatively, the third Diablo game averages out at about 18 hours. And Minecraft's own survival mode, one played with the intent to prepare for beating the Ender Dragon, takes about 40 hours to beat. It's honestly nothing short of embarrassing when Minecraft Dungeons' whole campaign equates to literally only 10% of the RPG gameplay found in the original game, and also is barely 20% the length of a Diablo campaign. So yeah, not exactly something worth bragging about, Mojang. You had one job. One job. And you still managed to fuck it up in a way that continues to amaze me. Now, while the total average length of its main campaign is a pretty strong indicator by which people tend to judge any RPG game, it's not the only factor worth considering. Another factor is the quality of the gameplay itself. How well designed are the weapons and character abilities, and conversely, how varied is the total number of enemy types, mini-boss types, and bosses. The best part of any good action RPG is the combat, and all these factors are the distinguishing elements that separate good combat from boring, tedious combat. In the case of Minecraft Dungeons, this is somewhat of a mixed bag, honestly. Nearly all the enemies present here in Minecraft Dungeons are the same types of enemies present in Minecraft itself, although there are a couple of variations of the same enemy types that are unique to Minecraft Dungeons itself. I'm not going to bother listing them all, since it is, admittedly, a pretty exhaustive list, and can be found on almost any wiki page dedicated to the original game. The number of mini-bosses is fairly scant. I came across only a handful in my entire time playing the game, certainly less than half a dozen in total. The number of bosses are similarly restricted. No level will contain more than one boss, and a few of the 9 total levels don't technically have any boss at all. So far, not so good. Dungeons are only as good as the enemies within them, and since most of the levels recycle the same types of enemies, it really comes down to the bosses themselves to impress the player. And admittedly, a couple of the bosses can be actually fun to fight against, but only when you tweak the difficulty a bit. The default difficulty settings in this game are insanely skewed in the wrong direction. If you played through this game using the recommended character level and gear power level, you could go in solo against even the most difficult, super powerful boss and beat them without losing a single life. In order to enjoy this game at a normal Diablo-like solo difficulty setting, I had to increase the difficulty so far it was recommended that only players with gear at power level 22 attempt to play. I was power level 13 and I beat the level in less than 15 minutes. If I tried something like that in any other RPG, I would have been obliterated by any dense clump of enemies within seconds. But Minecraft Dungeons? Oh no, yep. Beat the level, not a problem. Maybe lost like 1 life in like one of the levels. Now this is a little off topic, but it relates to the theme of this whole part of the discussion. Normally when I'm preparing to do a review, I deliberately try to avoid watching review videos from other YouTubers on the same game. But when I was looking at my YouTube recommendations a week or two ago when the game first came out and saw Jim Sterling put out a brief review of this game, I couldn't help hearing his take on it, since I strongly suspected he'd have a very similar outlook as I do here. And while Jim Sterling and I do differ on a couple of points here, he did say something I found quite funny, referring to Minecraft Dungeons as baby's first dungeon crawler. And yeah, that's pretty much on point. The normal difficulty here in Dungeons would be nothing more than a very easy type setting in any other RPG, the least challenging difficulty option, the kind of mode designed for those who might never have played an action RPG game before and lack any mechanical skill. So basically, your average IGN or Polygon reporter. To make it worse, Mojang seems to have also not bothered scaling certain gameplay elements down for solo players. This game behaves exactly the same whether 1 player or 4 are in the game, from a difficulty perspective. This makes certain segments like boss battles extremely and unnecessarily tedious. If you have a boss whose AI is designed to continually focus on 1 player at a time, thus allowing other players to attack him from behind when she's doing so, this forces a solo player to only fight from range, and hope that they have enough arrows to support this evasive tactic, because they would otherwise be unable to play the game as intended, since the main way of beating the boss, aka relying on other players to do what they cannot, is inherently unavailable to them. Now let's talk about some of the other aforementioned important action RPG mechanics. Character leveling and gear leveling. They're pointless. I really don't know how else to say it. They are pointless. Minecraft Dungeons does not feature any character skill unlock tree, nor any other form of permanent character skill unlocks. Nor are you able to level up your gear through repetitive use. Instead, leveling up your character grants you upgrade tokens for your weapons. You can spend these points on upgrading certain weapon stats. Each weapon has a handful of seemingly randomized traits, which can be active weapon abilities or can, alternatively, come in the form of passive buffs. Instead of leveling up your weapon, you'll have to grind certain levels to find higher leveled versions of that weapon type, although even then, the higher leveled weapon might actually feature a more useless ability kit. So it is very much a gamble whether or not upgrading to a higher stat item is really in your favor or not, if it means losing out on a pretty powerful active ability. Another popular action RPG mechanic featured here in Dungeons is cooldown abilities. By collecting gold coins scattered around any of the playable levels, players can purchase new cooldown abilities from an NPC merchant located in the main hub when they first load up the game. Cooldown ability cards can also be picked up as a rather rare variety of loot randomly dropped from mini-bosses and boss encounters, but more likely than not, the NPC merchant will be your main source of attaining loot. Just like any other form of loot, cooldown ability cards have level attributes. The lower level your ability card is, the less effective it will be against enemies the further you get into the campaign, to the point that you will literally be restricted from proceeding until you get a higher level item to replace it with. This also proves true to any other leveled item in your character's inventory. In this regard, Dungeons is very reminiscent of Destiny 2. Instead of allowing players to manually buy what weapons or gear they want from a traditional menu, Mojang instead elects to implement everyone's least favorite means of unlocking virtual goods, the much despised loot box system. Currently, it is not possible to buy loot boxes in Dungeons using real currency, but the mere presence of loot boxes as a game mechanic does make me hesitate and wonder why Mojang would elect for this unpopular mechanic knowing it would be negatively perceived, while also seemingly not bothering to monetize it from the onset. The only reasoning I can imagine, and I dearly hope this proves not to be the case, is that Mojang is leaving the door open to potentially quietly sliding in a paid loot box option later on. when the mainstream press and most of the usual YouTubers no longer pay as much attention to the game. However, the game has enough existing problems worth criticizing, so for the moment I'll move on from fixating on potential future ones too, to addressing the ones currently at hand. The first and most obvious contender on the list is the absolutely dreadful AI pathfinding. At several points throughout each level I played through, there were some truly embarrassing moments where I could just see whole crowds of enemies getting stuck on objects, unable to move around objects, headbutting into walls as if they were trying to walk through it, and otherwise acting like a bunch of TF2 bots that are missing a nav mesh file. Another prominent issue with the game is the frequent hard crashes and disconnection errors present when playing online, the game's default mode. But the amount of times I found myself disconnected from the game servers despite having a rather notably high internet download speed is quite remarkable in all the worst ways. Finally, I feel obligated to report that Dungeons somewhat misrepresents itself as a full game. It's not. Even on day one of the game, Mojang has seemingly already cut out game content already in development with the intention of releasing it later as paid DLC. I'm not a big fan of the idea of developers promoting their game as a complete package, only for users to discover on day one that part of the supposedly complete game is being sectioned off behind a paid DLC bin. I'm all for developers making post-launch DLC. I think it's one of the best and healthiest means of monetizing online games. DLC expansions is just overall, I think, a fair deal compared to loot boxes, for example. But I do not like the implication that the developers had literally planned out the entire map, even featuring said map in-game, with the intent to sell additional chunks piece by piece later. A good DLC expansion should make an already good game great. It should be like seasoning on a fine dinner or icing on the cake or whatever food analogy you prefer. It should not be used as an opportunity to make an incomplete game complete. But that really strikes the core of what makes Minecraft Dungeons such a disappointment. It feels incomplete at every turn, and no matter how many updates Mojang releases, it's unlikely that will change at all with every passing year. Which is why, if I had to give it a score, I would grade it a 5 out of 10. It is not a terrible game, it does do a few things right, but it seems for every one thing it gets right, it makes one equally or more significant mistake that proves far more prominent. I quite expect that my opinions and conclusions may prove rather divisive to Minecraft fans, assuming any decide to watch this video. But as with any game that gets reviewed here, I honestly try to judge it based on its own merits, not by comparing it with its predecessor. The problem with Dungeons is that if you do exactly that, it becomes a fairly worthless action RPG cash grab. And maybe it's just me, but I think the market is already flooded with cash grabs. I just find it disappointing that Mojang themselves isn't holding themselves to any higher standard. When I first began writing the script, I initially assumed Double 11 was the main developer behind this game, as they are credited on numerous websites as having developed the game in partnership with Mojang. Double 11, of course, being the studio that developed such games as Goat Simulator. However, after doing further investigation, I found that Double 11 is only responsible for developing the console ports of Minecraft Dungeons, similar to how they worked with Warner Brothers and Traveler's Tales to develop the console ports of the Lego Harry Potter games. As a result, I would have gone somewhat easier on the game than I otherwise would have, thinking of it as something like Telltale's Minecraft Story Mode game, a project being handled by a third-party studio which Mojang had little control over influencing. But no, Mojang had over a decade's worth of experience handling Minecraft and had the full backing of Microsoft, a company with enormous amounts of money and possessing multiple additional development studios that could have helped Mojang make the most of this game, but they didn't take advantage of those assets. Mojang didn't want to make a true action RPG aimed at the vast majority of the player base. They wanted to make a game that would only appeal to the very youngest among their players. The problem being, those kids aren't the ones who go out and buy action RPG games. Mojang did a hack job here, and I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt for doing so. Minecraft Dungeons gets a 4 out of 10. I changed my mind. I was going to give it a 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. It's an embarrassing mess of a game whose fundamental failing is a lack of any meaningful identity. And as a result, I cannot honestly recommend buying it. Is it a truly awful game? Well, not entirely. But it has far too many flaws to even be referred to as simply mediocre. It's bad, and it's a far cry from being comparable to any half-decent action RPG on the market. On that note, that's all I have for today, so I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. A thumbs up is always appreciated, and if you want to help out the channel, let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Also, I do respond to comments posted here on the channel below any of my videos, so if you're trying to reach out to me, I am seemingly one of the few remaining YouTubers who will actually respond to stuff, usually. The benefit of not yet being a big channel, I suppose, is I can actually still respond to each comment notification that pops up if I want to. If you want to get notified when I upload new review videos, I upload a new review at least once every 2 weeks, usually every 9 to 10 days. It takes time to get these out, but I enjoy making them, so subscribing to my channel and clicking the bell icon to receive notifications is currently the only seemingly functional way to stay up to date with everything, since my videos won't always show up in your subscription feed otherwise if you don't choose to hit the bell. So there's your warning of the day. Click the damn bell, will you? This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Peace out and stay safe.